At my father's will reading, my cousin laughed and said, "I took the money and spent it already. Good luck." The lawyer quietly smiled and slid a folder across the table. "Actually, you might want to read this first." My cousin's smirk vanished as he turned the first page. I knew something was off the moment I walked into the law office. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to hit. I sat at the long mahogany table, hands clenched in my lap. My father's will was about to be read, and while I wasn't expecting much, our relationship had been complicated. I was there out of respect. My cousin, Derek, was already seated across from me, lounging like he'd just won the lottery. He wore an expensive watch, a tailored suit, and shoes polished to a shine. That was my first clue something was wrong. Derek had never had money. He'd never dressed like this. The lawyer, Mr. Grant, cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. As you know, Mr. Porter's passing has left his estate to be distributed according to his wishes. Before we begin, are there any questions?" I stayed silent. Derek smirked. "Nah, no questions. Let's just get on with it." I narrowed my eyes. Something was wrong. Mr. Grant shuffled some papers and began reading. My father had left a significant amount of money, properties, and assets to be divided between me and Derek. But as he continued, I noticed something strange. Derek was grinning. Then came the bombshell. The inheritance, which was held in trust, was already distributed to Derek 6 months prior to Mr. Porter's passing, as per his request. My stomach dropped. "What?" Derek burst out laughing. "Oh man, I was wondering when you'd hear about that." He wiped a fake tear from his eye. "Yeah, I already got the money and spent it. Good luck getting anything." I just stared at him, my blood turning ice cold. Mr. Grant, however, was unfazed. If anything, he looked amused. That's when he did something I'll never forget. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table toward Derek. "Actually," he said calmly, "you might want to read this first." The smirk vanished from Derek's face as he flipped open the folder and scanned the first page. His face drained of color. What is this?" he stammered. Mr. Grant adjusted his glasses. "That, Mr. Derek, is what we in the legal profession call a trap." I had no idea what was going on, but I loved seeing Derek's smug face crumble. He flipped page after page, his hands starting to shake. This isn't real. It can't be." "Oh, it's very real," Mr. Grant said, leaning back in his chair. "You see, Mr. Porter was no fool. He suspected you'd try to manipulate him, so he did something very clever." I leaned in. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Grant turned to me, a small smile on his face. "Your father knew Derek was planning to get to his money early, so he set up a dummy inheritance, a false trust with conditions Derek never bothered to read. That trust wasn't part of his actual will. It was a test." I blinked. "A test?" Derek was shaking now. Mr. Grant ignored him. "Yes, your father wanted to see if Derek would try to take the money prematurely. If he did, it would trigger a clause disinheriting him from the real estate and assets." A slow, cold smile crept across my face. "So, you're saying the money he took wasn't even the real inheritance?" Mr. Grant nodded. Derek shot up from his chair, fists clenched. "You're lying. I spent it all. The houses, the cars. I invested it. You can't just..." Mr. Grant calmly slid another document across the table. "Actually, we can. That's a court order freezing all remaining assets linked to the stolen trust." Derek went silent. Then he screamed. I had never seen a grown man fall apart so quickly. Derek started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "This isn't happening. This isn't happening." Mr. Grant sighed. "Oh, it's happening, and it gets worse." Derek snapped his head up. "Worse?" Mr. Grant flipped to the next page and tapped it with his pen. "Your father anticipated you'd blow through the money, so he left instructions. You are now legally responsible for repaying every cent you took." Derek collapsed back into his chair, breathing heavily. I can't. There's nothing left." "That's unfortunate," Mr. Grant said with zero sympathy, "because the law firm is prepared to pursue this matter in full. Your father made sure of it." Derek's jaw clenched. You can't get blood from a stone." Mr. Grant raised an eyebrow. You can, if the stone committed fraud. I could barely contain myself. My father had set him up beautifully. Derek had tricked my father into giving him the money early, only to find out it was a test. And now he owed every penny back. I didn't even have to do anything. He played himself. Derek's breathing turned ragged. I have a house, a car, but... Mr. Grant held up a hand. Not anymore. All assets purchased with that money will be liquidated to cover the debt. You won't have a dime left. Derek sat there, completely destroyed. His hands trembled as he realized exactly what had happened. And me? I just sat back and watched. This was the best day of my life. Mr. Grant began gathering his papers, unfazed by the meltdown happening across the table. We will, of course, allow you time to review the documents with your own legal counsel, though I would advise against delaying things. The court orders go into effect immediately. Derek swallowed hard, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. No. This is fraud. He jabbed a finger in my direction. He's setting me up. This isn't real. It can't be real. I let out a small chuckle. Oh, it's real. Derek shot up from his chair so fast it nearly toppled over. I'll fight this. I'll sue. This is a scam. You can't just take my money. Mr. Grant gave him a tired look. It was never your money, Mr. Derek. It was a trust you stole from your own uncle, and now you're facing the consequences. I expected Derek to explode, maybe flip the table, maybe start screaming, but instead he did something worse. He smiled. A slow, twisted grin spread across his face. You think I'm just going to let this happen? He said softly. You think I don't have options? I stiffened. Mr. Grant didn't react, but I saw the way his fingers curled just a little tighter around his briefcase. Derek leaned forward, lowering his voice. Let me make this simple. You call this off, and I'll make sure nothing bad happens. Silence. Then Mr. Grant let out a breath. Ah, threats. That's always the last move of a desperate man. Derek's grin faded. Mr. Grant gave him a pointed look. I suggest you reconsider your words, Mr. Derek, because if you think you're in trouble now, just wait until the law gets involved. Derek sat back down, his face twisted with rage. That's when Mr. Grant turned to me. There's one more thing, he said. Derek groaned, slumping in his chair. Oh, what now? What else could you possibly take from me? Mr. Grant didn't answer him. Instead, he pulled out another folder and handed it to me. This, he said, is something your father wanted you to have personally. I frowned. What is it? Read. I opened the folder. The first page made my heart stop. It was proof. Bank statements, fraudulent signatures, years of stolen money, and Derek's name was all over it. My head shot up. This is... Yes, Mr. Grant said. This isn't just about the trust or the money he wasted in the last 6 months. Derek has been stealing from your father for years. I could hear Derek's breathing getting heavier. His foot tapped rapidly under the table. You're lying, he said through clenched teeth. No, I said, flipping through the pages. You are. Loan applications in my father's name, withdrawals from secret accounts, even a forged sale of one of his properties. Derek wasn't just a greedy idiot. He was a criminal. Mr. Grant turned to him. Your uncle didn't want to press charges while he was alive, but upon his death, he instructed us to proceed. Derek looked like he was about to be sick. I closed the folder, my mind racing. So what happens now? Mr. Grant sighed. Well, that depends. He turned back to Derek. If you cooperate, we may be able to settle this civilly. But if you fight, if you try anything, then we pursue full legal action, including criminal charges. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. He was trapped, and he knew it. I thought that would be the end of it, but then Derek did something I never saw coming. The escape plan. 3 days later, Derek disappeared. No calls, no emails, no sign of him anywhere. At first, I thought maybe he'd gone into hiding, trying to delay the inevitable, but then I got a call from Mr. Grant. We have a problem, he said. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The kind that involves fraudulent passports and an attempt to flee the country. I sat up straight. You're kidding. I wish I was. Mr. Grant sighed. Derek bought a one-way ticket to Argentina. He's trying to run. A slow burn of rage built in my chest. Oh, hell no. Did he make it? There was a pause, then Mr. Grant chuckled. Number he got caught at the airport. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. The final revenge. Derek was arrested at the airport with a fake passport, a suitcase full of cash, and a very expensive watch he forgot wasn't technically his anymore. Turns out faking your identity while under active investigation for financial crimes is a great way to get locked up immediately. Just like that, Derek went from a cocky, grinning con artist to a wanted fugitive with no way out. The court seized everything. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. Even his personal belongings were liquidated to cover his debts. And me? I got exactly what my father wanted me to have. Everything. Derek didn't go down quietly. He spent months trying to fight the case, but there was too much evidence, too many paper trails, forged signatures, and mistakes. In the end, the law caught up. Derek was convicted of multiple counts of fraud, theft, and attempted identity fraud. His sentence, 15 years. I visited him once, just once. He looked different. Thinner, paler. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow and broken. You happy? He spat through the glass. I thought about that for a second, then smiled. Yes, and I walked away. After Derek's conviction, I thought it was all over. I had won. I got my father's estate, his money, his business. Derek was rotting in prison, stripped of everything. I was finally free of him. Or so I thought. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I received a letter. Not an email, but an actual handwritten letter. It was from Derek. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the best of me. The letter was short, and it scared the hell out of me. You think this is over? I have friends. You took everything from me. Now I'm taking something from you. No signature, just that one chilling sentence. I reread it twice, my pulse spiking. It wasn't just anger. It was a threat. I locked all my doors that night. At first, nothing happened. Weeks passed, then months. I started to think maybe he was bluffing. Until the break-in. It happened at 3 a.m. My security system blared, waking me in a panic. Someone was trying to force their way in. By the time the police arrived, the intruder was gone, but they left something behind. A single playing card, a joker, taped to my front door. I went straight to Mr. Grant. This is impossible, I said, pacing in his office. He's in prison. Mr. Grant nodded, looking troubled. He is, but that doesn't mean he's powerless. Derek had connections, small-time criminals, shady business partners, people who owed him favors, and now they're coming for you. That's when I made a decision. If Derek wanted a war, I'd give him one. I hired a private investigator. If Derek had people on the outside working for him, I needed to know who. The PI, a guy named Henderson, was good. 2 weeks later, he came back with names. Derek had 3 key people still running his dirty work. Victor Cole, a former accountant who helped him launder stolen money. Ray Bones Martinez, an enforcer, violent and dangerous. And Samantha Price, an ex-girlfriend, smart, cunning, and the real mastermind behind Derek's last-minute schemes. Henderson leaned back in his chair. These people don't scare easy, and they don't back down. I clenched my fists. Neither do I. I needed to do what my father did to Derek, set a trap. So, I baited them. I made it look like I was about to move all the estate's liquid assets into a single, vulnerable account. It was a lie, of course, but I made sure the right people heard about it. It worked. 3 days later, Samantha Price showed up at my bank. She tried to withdraw money using forged documents. She didn't know the account was flagged, and the bank manager was already working with the police. The second she handed over the fake paperwork, the alarms went off. She was arrested on the spot. Samantha cracked fast. Facing multiple felonies, she flipped on everyone. Victor Cole was arrested for fraud and tax evasion. Ray Bones Martinez was caught with illegal weapons and outstanding warrants. And the best part, Derek had been orchestrating everything from prison using a smuggled phone. When investigators searched his cell, they found written plans for hitting my accounts, my house, and even my family. That was the final nail in his coffin. Derek's original 15-year sentence turned into 35 years. No parole. I didn't visit him this time, but I sent him a letter. It was short and simple. Checkmate. I never heard from him again, but I know somewhere in that prison, he read that letter and realized I had destroyed him for good. Derek was finished. His scam had collapsed. His allies were either arrested or flipped on him, and his sentence was doubled, ensuring he'd spend the rest of his best years rotting behind bars. I should have felt relief, but I wasn't done yet. Even after everything, Derek was still trying to fight back from prison. He hired a lawyer, a sleazy, high-priced guy who specialized in getting criminals off the hook. Derek was desperate. He had nothing left to lose. His lawyer sent me a letter demanding a settlement. A settlement. The man who stole from my father, who spent my inheritance, who tried to ruin me, was now begging for money. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Then I got to work. I hired my own lawyer, the best money could buy. And I didn't just fight back. I countersued for damages, for emotional distress, for every last cent he tried to take. The case moved fast. The judge took one look at Derek's history and threw out his case immediately. My countersuit was approved. The court ruled that everything Derek had left, his personal belongings, his prison wages, any future money he might inherit, would go to me. Every dollar he would ever make, mine. Even behind bars, he would be working for me. I sent him one last letter. It was simple. Now you work for me. Enjoy the next 35 years. No threats, no insults, just the cold, hard truth. I never got a reply, but I imagined Derek sitting in his tiny prison cell, reading those words over and over, realizing he lost everything. Derek used to think money was power. He thought that if he had enough, he could lie, cheat, and steal his way through life. But in the end, the law caught up, karma caught up, and I made sure he paid for every last bit of his greed. For the first time in my life, I felt free. And Derek? He was exactly where he deserved to be.